So due diligence, arguably one of the most crucial steps, I would say, of the multifamily deal, because this is where you find pretty much truth of the property that you're buying, right? So for those of you unfamiliar, due diligence starts after the offer has been accepted, typically day 0, day 1, you get going. And this is your period where you should at least inspect everything. And ultimately, in the end, you want to determine, is this deal still valid, I guess, to pursue and go forward. So taking a step back, right? And so when I say that you want to find truth, going in to due diligence, you really don't know much truth about the property other than, let's say, the location of it, because you know where it is, and the purchasing price. But apart from that, you can walk through the property, you can underwrite, you get the T12 and the rent roll, but even those are unaudited typically, at least from what I've seen. So really, this is your chance. You're going to inspect everything, get a professional now to inspect the roofs, inspect the plumbing, and Kyle and Gary are going to go over all of this. You're going to do actual lease audits, so you see what the truth is essentially, and you're going to see how the property is actually operating. And then you're going to go back and turn that in your underwriting and see, does it still work for you? And this is why people say, right, conservatively underwrite, because you're going to find oddities during your due diligence more often than not. And so typical due diligence period, 0 to 60 days. That changes and definitely varies depending on the market you're in, how competitive you have to be with your offer, and also just the type of property. We walked a property this weekend and they wanted the due diligence within a few weeks, but it was a small property, 16 units, versus if you had 100 plus units, it's going to take a lot longer to go through all that. So it goes without saying, but you want to start as soon as possible. You want to find all the oddities and what's wrong with the property essentially as soon as possible, and either determine if you have to change your business plan going forward, or maybe go back to the seller and ask for a lower price. Or maybe at the end of the day, you might just walk away because it just doesn't work. During COVID, and maybe Gary and Kyle can speak to this, but when I spoke to a broker, I don't know if this is still going, but I know the due diligence period was negotiated to even past 60 days just because of the social distancing, and harder to get a hold of, just get workers.
It kind of ranged in different markets. It still might be even 30 days during COVID, but your contingencies are longer. Contingencies based on maintaining rental income or financing or other contingencies. Those are the things that are, I guess, more negotiable. And we see in the Phoenix and Tucson area, typically due diligence could be like 21 days. It really doesn't, the due diligence itself doesn't take that long. It's those third-party reports that are a part of it, that's the part that takes a while. And then starting as soon as possible, I would, sometimes you can negotiate access while you're working on the contract too, particularly if you have a small due diligence period. So it all depends on how competitive your market is, and it seems like most markets are super competitive.
Yeah, we did make an offer actually on a property today where we added back in our COVID clause. We had taken that out because when we invest in Arizona, they're pretty much open for business. However, with California now starting to raise their restrictions, we're at the highest level now. You're just not sure what's going to happen. So it's always better to have something in rather than not have it. And if the seller doesn't want it in there, he or she can tell you, and then you can go from there. But if you don't have it in the initial LOI, it's going to be difficult to add it into the PSA. And all that says is that if there's any type of delay in any due diligence items, whether that's viewing units, accessing the property, that will get additional time and extend out those dates based on the amount of delay there is due to COVID.
And again, if anyone has questions on any of these slides, unmute, ask away. Don't hesitate. Anything else you wanted to add, Robbie?
No, I think that's it.
All right.
All right, I'm going to talk about some reports that you get during due diligence, and there's also 2 reports that we didn't list here that I want to talk about, but Gary, click the next thing. The property survey. So this is basically a survey of your property lines, shows the easements, zonings, ingress and egress. This can be done, or you can bypass it. Some lenders don't require it. However, I always say to do it. It costs about $2,500 to $3,000, and it's worth getting because usually there's not going to be anything wrong, but the reason you get these types of things is to be notified of when something is wrong. And so if you close on a deal, didn't get a survey, and then go to sell it in 5 years and something pops up, that could delay or even kill your sale on the back end. So it's good to know these things. We hire an attorney to review this because we really don't know everything you need to know about evaluating a survey and auditing a survey. So it's good just to get a survey and then have your attorney review it and then come back with any notes. Yes, that does cost extra money, but again, it's worth paying $3,000 to $5,000 on the front end to save maybe 50, 100, even more on the back end. So this is one thing in the due diligence that we get. Gary, you left, but I need you to control the slides. All right, environmental report. So this is a big one, and this is one that the lender will require. And typically you get a phase 1 report, and what it does is it goes into the environmental contamination, if there is any of the property. And so these reports are several hundreds of pages long, and the lender sends someone out there to do these reports, and they want to know anything from, are there underground gas tanks? Was this site previously a gas station? Were there any leaks or any spills in this area? And one of our properties last year that we closed on was actually in a spill zone, but it didn't actually get to our property. However, the lender considered doing a phase 2 report until we were able to find actually another report that stated that we were outside of that zone. So a little bit of a scary moment, but if you get into that area where you're in a phase 2, I personally would probably jump out of the deal. The phase 2 is quite costly, takes even longer. By that time, you may not even have any contingency, so you could lose your deposit. And once you're in a phase 2, the lender has identified some challenges and issues with the property. So, you know, my advice would be to not go into a phase 2 and kind of dump the deal. But that is a report that is highly looked at by the lender. And then title report, this is another one that we hire our attorney to look at for us. Very important. You want to know if there's any liens on the property, anything past due, if they paid their taxes. All the reports are in here, and they're linked to all those things like old surveys, easements, contracts with cable companies, laundry, things like that. We have our attorney review this because this is a boilerplate template that also has a lot of legal jargon in it, and it's best for an attorney to review because they have that experience. The other reports that we don't have on here is an appraisal report. Very important. Every lender is going to get that. And then the other one is a PCA report. So that's a property condition assessment. And what comes with that, that's a several hundred page report as well. But what comes with that is an estimate on immediate repairs that need to be made to the property. And they'll lay it out on a 1-page document for you of the things that they think have 1 year, 5 year, 10-year life. And usually the lender will do what's called a IRL, which is a immediate repair list. This is a list that a lot of people don't know about when you're dealing with agency debt. This is a non-negotiable list of repairs you need to make from the lender, and they will hold back the money in escrow until it's done. And then you have to show proof that it's done, and then you have to request those funds to get back. For, as an example, Gary and I have been trying to get back $100,000 that was held back for 5 months now. So it's, and it's just been slow because of COVID, and they've had some turnover and things like that. So we've done the repairs, but it is a pain to get it back from the lender sometimes. And they actually have to fly someone out to the property, inspect it, and that costs money too. These are things a lot of people miss in their underwriting, is that immediate repair list. Let's just say you know that part of the roof needs to be repaired, but you decide to skip it and not put it in your underwriting. Well, if it's on the immediate repair list from the lender, it's required to be fixed. And so now you've got to add more money into your budget. So this is always why it's good to fix and budget for all deferred maintenance when you're going into a property, because the lender's probably going to have you fix it anyways. And then just to have additional reserves in your underwriting, right? So just in case there's a couple of items in that immediate repair list from the lender that you're not quite sure about, that way you have that as a buffer. And that's something Gary and I always do, is put an extra $150,000 to $250,000 in there for unforeseen things that the lender may bring up. So we've got a couple questions here.
A couple questions, yeah.
Can you request and use a survey that the previous owner may have ordered? Yes, but you're going to have to get approval from the lender. For example, the one we're closing on next month, they were okay with using the survey that was done in 2015. If this owner has owned it for 10 plus years, then I don't know, so if you get approval from the lender and you feel okay with it, then that's fine. If there's been a lot of building and things going on, construction in the area, I would suggest maybe doing another survey, because things change. And again, this is $2,500, very small amount of money when you're buying multi-million-dollar properties. It's always better to sleep well at night knowing that you got a report and you've got it signed off on, versus just wondering and knowing.
Kyle, if I can just speak on that.
Yeah.
If you could find who did the initial survey, you could get them to update the survey and you could get it for a lower cost. Typically it's up to the title company to decide whether or not they're going to accept it, but it's up to them. Perfect.
Thanks for that. Are these reports something you would provide your investors if requested? I don't see why not. If you want to do some light reading for a couple of months and read through 1,000 pages, sure. No problem. We're not hiding anything. I don't know that every sponsor would do that, but feel free to take a look if you're an investor. I mean, you invested in that property and you have every right to know what's in those reports. Is the property survey and environmental report required by the lender? The property survey, not always. The environmental report, yes. But the lender, I would say for agency lenders, typically want to see a property survey. You can opt out of it at your own risk. How do you determine how much to put aside for repairs? 150, 250 seems high for, say, $1 million property. Yeah, absolutely. That is high on a percentage basis for $1 million property. I definitely wouldn't put that much. But it's going to be, you're going to find a lot out during due diligence. And I'm going to talk about some steps you need to go through during due diligence. But essentially, you're out there for several days walking the property and understanding the deferred maintenance, the things that need to be fixed immediately. You should be talking to every vendor that you have out there during due diligence before they leave the property, so you understand the condition of the property. And that's kind of how you gauge how much you need. It's never going to be a perfect amount. And there's no exact percentage, I would say, when you're underwriting. It really depends on the condition of the property. But essentially, the lender is looking for a lot of deferred maintenance, and those are items that are going to need to be fixed. And to be honest, they should be fixed anyways. They're going to reduce your day-to-day expenses drastically, especially if you have things like leaks and plumbing issues, things like that. So it really is on a case-by-case basis.
And I would say also, it depends on your business plan too. Like, is it a big value add? I mean, there might be cases where you're going to spend $750, on $1 million property, depending upon what you're doing with it. So, you could tell by pictures, talking to the broker. There's a lot of things you could do before you even get to due diligence as well.
Yep. Seth Marcus says, speaking of reserves, have your principles on minimum reserves changed as a result of initial COVID unknowns? Oh, have our principles on minimum reserves? Yeah, I mean, agency lenders are actually asking you to hold back an additional, depending on the size of the loan, and Fannie or Freddie, anywhere from 9 months to 18 months of reserves. And that's changing quite often. So you have that in addition to your other reserves. So yes, it has. And we definitely want to make sure there's enough. It does make underwriting a deal tougher when you have to throw in those reserves. But if you find a deal and close on it, it's nice to know you do have that extra buffer in there. I mean, if you're paying, if you're buying a couple $1 million property, you're going to have a couple $100,000 of extra reserves in there, which is nice. Okay. All right, inspect everything. So, when you do due diligence, this is your opportunity to find everything wrong with the property. And when we do due diligence, we are literally trying to find a reason not to buy this property. And that's when you're buying a business, a multi-million-dollar business, that's how you should be approaching this. You want to find everything that is wrong with the property. So you need to schedule appointments with as many subcontractors as necessary. Gary, keep going. And so what we do is we have every single trade come out to the property when we do due diligence. There's times where there might be 30 people on the property at once looking at it. And we also get multiple vendors for each trade. So we don't just have one HVAC company, one asphalt company, one roofer come out. We have multiple of each of those trades so that we can get multiple eyes on each thing and also multiple quotes. So our property management has their vendors that they suggest. We have other relationships that we bring out as well just to take a look. And so we'll get at least 2 quotes, if not 3 quotes for everything that needs to be fixed. But you need to have all of these types of trades: general contractor, termite, HVAC, plumber. We always have the plumbing inspected, and the electrician. So you need to make sure the electrical is good to go from, number one, the lender's point of view. There are 2 panels out there. One is Zinsco and the other is General Pacific. If your properties have those electrical panels, most lenders will actually make you upgrade and replace those because they've had issues in the past. And so that's something that's common in buildings that are older than 1980s. And so if you're buying in that, you're going to have to take a look. But you also want to make sure there's enough electricity or whatever in the panels to be able to pull. If you're going to add washers and dryers, do you have enough electrical to install washers and dryers? So those are things that you can't just assume you can install washers and dryers on a 2-bedroom, 1-bath unit if the electricity or if the electrical panel doesn't support it. So these are all things that you need to be asking yourself, and you can actually probably ask before due diligence. But if you haven't asked that question yet, you definitely need to be asking it here. So during a due diligence report, you will have all these vendors take pictures of their trade, scope the lines, send you more information. But one thing that I always do when we're out there in due diligence, none of these contractors leaves a property without talking to us, so that we have a download of what they found right away. In today's market, you've got to do shorter due diligences. Sometimes 14 days is as short as we've done it. So you need that information now. Some of these reports don't come back for 3 weeks. And so you need that download right away. So we make sure that anyone that is on the property doesn't leave until they talk to us.
We got a question here. Do the contractors usually charge a fee to do walkthroughs knowing they'll be competing with other vendors? Some contractors do, some don't. It all depends what trade they're in.
Yeah, but we don't ever pay for that. I mean, look, if they want our business, then they're going to come out and inspect our property. We've never paid for someone to come out and just give us a guesstimate or an estimate. We do, however, pay our third-party property management company to do the due diligence for us. Another thing you should be doing is reviewing your insurance losses. The reason you want to do this is because you're going to be able to identify some past issues. If there's nothing on the insurance losses, then great. If there's fires or, plumbing bursts or, a roof got blown off, things like that, those are good things to know, because then you get to find where the weak spots are in your property, and you can harden those assets or harden those areas to make sure you don't continue to have them in the future. Yep. Let's see. Do you hire an inspector first and read over inspection before you send out subs? Do you hire an inspector first? No, we do all this at the same time. So due diligence is pretty quick, 21 to 30 days. And so the report that we end up getting back from our property management company, who is essentially our inspector, we hire them to do our inspection. They provide a 150-page report to us, and some of that report is based on the feedback of the subs. And so the subs are really important. Now, if you have a dedicated inspection company, I still think you should bring all those subs out at the same time. As many eyes as you can get on due diligence, the better, right? Because there's a very good chance you might miss something, or the inspector doesn't get to something, or they can't access the roof at that time. So it's important to get as many people out there looking at it as possible. With the shorter DD period, how do you get around the lender's third-party inspectors not having time to produce reports in time? Yeah, we did a 21-day DD last year in Tucson. Our lender's reports were not finished by then. Yeah, so we've had that too. We've finished due diligence and our money's gone non-refundable, even when we're waiting on the third-party reports. We rely on a couple things there. Obviously, the feedback from due diligence that day. That's why we make sure every contractor or vendor talks to us before they leave the property. That's extremely important. And then number two, we always request, it's not always available, but the reports from the seller. And so you can identify some of the things, even the property we're doing right now. We've looked over their environmental report, looked over their survey, looked over their appraisal. And so you can kind of see if any red flags 4 or 5 years ago are on there, and kind of get an idea of that before you do due diligence. And then when you do due diligence, you can check those things out. But there's not always a perfect answer for that. You know, based on your assessment, you're going to have to make a decision on whether or not you want to move forward without some of those reports, which is why it's really important to have that buffer in your renovations budget for anything unforeseen that may pop up from the lender. So it's just about really being diligent about your due diligence.
Hey, Kyle, Gary, how about reviewing all this due diligence paperwork? As you're getting these surveys and reports, do you have somebody else review it as well, or are you an expert in everything?
No, so like the title reports, what was the first report? The title report. What was it?
You've asked the lawyer too.
Yeah, the survey, we've asked a lawyer to review it. And so if there's something in there, even if there's something in the appraisal or the property condition assessment that comes back that we're not quite sure on, we always say, should we get a lawyer involved? And the answer is usually yes, just to take a look to make sure that, we're covering all of our dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's. But, the appraisals and the property condition reports, there are a lot of information, but there are key pages. A lot of them are just pictures and things like that too. So there's a summary in there. And if there's any red flags, they'll be in that summary.
When you're taking investors' money, if you don't understand something completely, spend the money. It's whether it's $500 an hour for the lawyer or $1,000, it's well worth it just to make sure your butt is covered, your investors are covered. Don't take any risks. You want investors coming back, and you want to be in this business for a long time. So you got to make sure you do things right.
Yeah, always remember you have someone else's money on the line, especially when you're syndicating, right? This is not just your money. If you want to be irresponsible with your money, then, go for it. But when you have other people's money on the line, do not be irresponsible in any way. All right, when walking we already covered this. Gary, can you click through? Yeah. So we do also walk our own properties when we're on due diligence. So I'm the type of person that wish I could walk every single unit. I still wish I walked every single unit, but our team did walk every unit, so if it's just Gary and I, and we've got a 100-unit property, we'll each walk 50 units. 176-unit property, we had 3 people, so we each walked about 60 units. And you want to take pictures. The property management company did that for us. You want to label each unit as whether it's under rehab, needs full rehab, is a partial rehab, is a full rehab, so that when you're going back to tighten up your budget, you understand how much rehab is really needed on the interiors. But you should also be looking at all these other things: walkways, parking lot, curbs, roof. Parking lot's a big one. A lot of people just skim over that one, but those every 5 years or so, you're going to have to do some type of slurry work or something on them. And that can be anywhere from, 10 grand to 60 grand. Electrical panels, I mentioned, paint, doors and windows. A lot of the windows now are just so old and so thin that you're going to need to replace them. We always put in extra reserves for HVACs. At least a third of the units we'll put in, depending on the shape, but typically our number is a third there. So this is the time to inspect literally everything. And I already kind of talked about that, but we even have someone evaluate any mold, lead paint, things like that.
we have a knack for wanting to inspecting 50 units plus each on a 110-degree day, which is no fun.
It's our weight loss program.
Yeah.
Let's see, third party company you should hire, yep. So like I said, the third party property management company provides us a 150-page report. And what that report does is it lists every unit, every thing they found within those unit. It lists the comps, what they think the rents could be and should be. They list a 5-year plan of where your expenses need to be. So year 1, this is your deferred maintenance list of items you need to repair. Year 2, you're going to need to do this, 3, 4, and 5. And so you can kind of see and back into how much you need per month on your reserves. And that's kind of how we get that number. The lender will require a certain number as well, but sometimes you may need more in reserves than just what the lender requires, which is typically between $200 and $300 a unit. If there's a lot of deferred maintenance that you're not going to tackle with your CapEx budget, things like replacing HVACs, things like replacing appliances, then your reserves per unit may need to be higher. So that third party report, we read every page of that to make sure that we're not missing anything. You do want to be wary if you're not allowed to see a certain unit. I think right now with COVID, you may not be able to see 1 or 2 units. I think there was 1 unit we were not able to see at our last property because the resident did say no. And at that point we weren't able to go in. But if the owner or the property management company is saying, these 10 units are not available to see and we're outside of COVID, I would definitely question that. You want to be able to know everything going on. We have a story about our property in Phoenix. This wasn't during due diligence, but this was the day before or day of close, right, Gary? And the unit was completely gutted. It was a down unit, and we were told that all units were operational. And in our contract, we had that there was to be no down units or we would get a credit. We had to make a decision to move forward or fall out at that point. We moved forward because the property was 99% occupied. So that was kind of the offset of that. But you want to see every unit. If there's certain units that are not available to you, it could be in dire straits, and that's not something you want to take over. And it could even have, who knows, fire damage, right? Which is probably one of the worst things. Who provides a third party report with such detail? So you're going to want to interview, we use our third party property management company, and there's a couple of reasons why we use them. They've got an in-house general contractor. He's been on the team for 30 plus years. He really knows his stuff, and we trust him, and we've, spent hours and hours with him building that relationship and knowing his expertise. But there are other companies that just do these types of inspections, and they may even provide you with even more detailed reports. So it depends on the market, and I would just either ask your property management company or ask people in the local market, but it's just building relationships. But they should be providing you with detailed reports like this. If you're not getting your detailed report like this in due diligence, then you probably need to find another source. All right, Gary, this is your slide.
All right, so lease audits. A big part of doing due diligence on a site is lease audit. So you have someone going through every single lease, and you want to make sure, is the current, qualified to pay the rent? I mean, our last purchase, we found a lot of uncredit-worthy tenants. They were just bringing them in just to stuff the rent roll, and we knew this going in, so it wasn't a surprise. You want to make sure that when someone is, if it says 1,200 on the rent roll, that it matches up with the lease as well. If they're not, what other things that were promised? I mean, when you take over a property, it's crazy what, someone was at our last property granted like 3 parking spots, and we're very limited on parking spots. There's just little weird things that show up that you'll find out hopefully in the lease audit. And just like with every unit, they'll do a breakdown for everything. Who's paying pet rent or whatnot, if you're walking a unit and you see a pet and it's not matching up with a lease, then that's a problem. That's an opportunity to make more money as well. So a lot of information is found in the lease audit, and don't take it lightly, because it's another vital part of due diligence. Utility bills, you want to go back and see, identify any undisclosed trends. You might see that utilities have jumped up quite a bit, and so maybe there's another opportunity for you. There's a leak somewhere or whatnot that you can find, but you want to see if there's a big disparity on the utility bills. And contracts too, you want to see, did they enter a, all the units have cable ready? Maybe they got the last owner got a $21,000 payment or whatever it is. These are some of the things you want to uncover. And then are you entitled to a proration? Is that in your contract? If your business plan is to put in washer dryers and they have a laundry agreement for 5 more years and a big penalty if you install washer dryers, that's just something that you want to be looking for. All these different contracts, it gets tiresome reading all these things and all the legalese, but it's so important to understand all the different things that were agreed to beforehand that you're going to be taking over. And maybe some of these contracts, they have a clause in there that doesn't roll over to the new owner too. So you just got to be aware of everything. So yeah, laundry, trash pickup, landscaping, pest control. Usually the landscaping and pest control, you can switch, right away. It's that laundry that's the big one that might have a longer term contract and penalty. And Robbie, if you see questions, let me know, because I won't see it pop up.
You're good so far.
The one thing besides the laundry, Gary, is also the cable contract. You might have a cable contract that you can't get out of.
Yeah. All right, so reassessment. So maybe when you first saw the property, you walked the comps, but this is another opportunity to walk the comps again. Things change. And it's just a really good opportunity. Now you're really into the deal. You're looking for different things. You'll see different things when you walk the comps again. So it's really worthwhile to walk the comps again, and not just the CoStar report that might give you properties that are 4 miles away, 7 miles away, that don't make any sense. When you're working with CoStar, you want to find properties that are as close to your property as possible, preferably the same vintage, same size, same amenities. You want to look at go to as many comps as you can, so you just get a better feel for that market. You want to rely on your third-party property management company to be an expert in that submarket, but the more information too, it just helps. It helps on your business plan, on the upgrades. You don't want to over improve. You don't want to under improve. You want to see what, are they getting rubs? If you're charging rubs, is everything included? These are the things that you're going to look at. You have a much clearer vision when you walk the comps again. And then you want to update your underwriting to reflect, anything else that might have changed. Maybe you could push rents more. Maybe you've got to dial back the rents. Maybe you found that there are some more costs that you have to be aware of. So, if you underwrote a tremendous savings in utilities in 3 years in a row, they've had utilities much higher, unless you're doing water conservancy or, LED lighting or whatnot. I mean, those are things that you need to consider. And if you are putting in, low flow toilets and whatnot, it doesn't happen like that. It takes time to install. It takes time to start seeing the savings. I wouldn't put a big savings in year one, even if you get to it right away. It just, everything takes time to implement. I saw a couple questions that popped up.
Yeah, one question came up. It says, when you audit the lease and find a tenant several months late in rent or bad credit, what do you do?
Well, obviously, if they're several months behind, you want to get them out, and it all depends, where this property is. If it's California, it's a lot harder. Is it during COVID when there's a moratorium? That's another problem. I know in Arizona, if someone is not paying rent and they can't show proof that they've been affected by COVID and haven't tried to at least get some of the grants out there and whatnot, then we can evict them. Well, which is nice. And obviously in California, you can get away with a lot more. It's much more tenant friendly, whereas Arizona is much more landlord friendly. There's another one too, Robbie, right?
No, I think that was the only one.
All right, so after you adjust your underwriting, if you need to, does this deal still make sense? It's not, even if you've got hard money down, don't be afraid to walk away from a deal. I've heard a lot of people say their best deal was the one they've walked away from, because if you don't want to lose that hard money and you do a deal that doesn't make sense, and you don't deliver the returns that you've promised to your investors, those investors won't come back. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to do a deal that doesn't make sense after due diligence. Make sure everything is good to go. And like Kyle said, we build in a lot of buffers because you don't know when, curveballs come, like COVID or tornado and whatnot, and you might have some insurance, but insurance doesn't cover everything. There are times when multiple things go wrong, and it could be no fault to you, but things change. So you gotta make sure in your underwriting there's room for error, because if you don't have any error, you've got a home run, and congrats, and that's awesome. But if you could sustain a punch and still do well, then you underwrote it well. And again, if the deal doesn't make sense, you can go back to them and try to negotiate a lower price. But you have to give your reasoning, and the seller can take the discount, and because they maybe don't want to waste 3 more months again and go through the whole process and whatnot. Or they may say no. You never know, but it doesn't hurt to ask. But you've got to make sure you explain it to the broker, and it's not just over some silly small thing, because that broker will not want to work with you again. So you got to make sure it makes enough material sense.
I think Kyle answered this, but maybe you can answer again just to
Yeah.
be safe. Who provides a third-party report with such detail? So kind of going back.
So whether you hire an outside company to do it, we use our property management company, and they'll give us a report. It's like 200 pages. It includes every single unit, every single vendor that came out and put a bid, and they might say on that report, this is what we suggest that you'll need to repair in year 1. This is what might happen in year 2, year 3, year 4, just so it matches with your business plan. If you just worry about what's going to happen in year 1 and not worry about year 2, 3, 4, and 5, you might not have raised enough money, and you may need to do a capital call, which is a big no. You don't ever want to do a capital call. So make sure you read that nice and clear and have a plan. HVAC. The bigger the property, HVAC is going to go out every year, and your reserves aren't going to be enough. So you got to make sure you account for that in your raise and in your budget. Any other questions? I see some more. Let's see here.
Rudy's got
Do you
one.
have to put down hard money in your experience? Again, it's really market dependent. It's also, you know, where you are. Like during COVID, you know, most properties you didn't have to put hard money down, but now we lost out on. I mean, this was a big deal, but someone put down 500,000 a couple of weeks ago on a property Kyle and I went after. And we looked at each other like, I don't know if we'll ever put down 500,000 of hard money, you know? You got to evaluate your risk and how, you know, does it make sense for you to do? You can also have someone come in, put down the hard money for you, and they get, you know, a piece of the profits. Now, it's not going to be cheap, but that's an option as well. So besides CoStar, what other tools do you use for comps? Yeah, I'm not a big fan of CoStar for comps. You know, you'll if you go on a map and you see, you're going to see, you know, plenty more properties that CoStar did not pick up that are much better comps than they provided. It's crazy. But as far as tools, a lot of it is just searching on a map. We do like a neighborhood scout as a tool to kind of understand that submarket as far as household income, crime, schools, and it'll give, you know, it's like 20 pages and it'll go past history and how is it trending too. So it's really worthwhile. I think we pay like $1,000 a year, and I think we get like up to 50 reports a month. If you're doing enough deals, it's definitely worthwhile. Again, the more information you have, the more informed you're going to be. You know, the better it is going to be for your investors.
And also for a free tool, Anthony, you can just use apartments.com. I mean, that's kind of what we've been using, apartments.com and Google Maps. You type in the address of your property for apartments.com and you'll see dots pop up all around it, and just start clicking and see if they look comparable to what you want that property to be.
Yeah, I like Google as a tool. You know, you could see Starbucks, how many Starbucks are around that area. You know, where you know, try to find maybe a Whole Foods or just different, you know, look at the shopping centers near that area and see. Obviously, when you're driving the area too, you want to drive, you know, a mile radius. You know, is there a rundown mall, you know, strip mall right by the property? I mean, you've got to really understand that submarket. I know some people, I mean, they'll buy small stuff without even going out there. But if you're using other investors' money, you need to go out there. You need to, you know, really know that area and feel good about it. Yeah, Greg, the Starbucks test is a good one. Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like one thing too that I just started actually doing is pulling up a zoning map too. If you pull up a zoning map of that area, you can see what's zoned for multifamily around you. So you can focus your efforts on the Google Maps if you're using that to look in that.
Nice. Any other questions before we break out into networking? All right.